Blogs. I am your host, Shaina Smith, welcoming you to the National Boardroom, where tonight we're going to have a very interesting conversation with one of our educators here in the Virgin Islands, Mr. Cecil Hodge. Welcome, Mr. Hodge.
Thank you, and I would say a pleasant good evening to your listening audience.
Okay. And I'm happy to be here. I think this is your first time in the boardroom.
Second time with you.
Second time in the boardroom. All right, I couldn't remember. Been a while I'm doing this.
Just a long time ago you had me on.
Yeah, so welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. We were just chatting before we got started about, the myriad of things going on in our community. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting dialogue tonight.
Right.
But let's start off with one of the things that persons most know you for, the Teachers Union. You're the president of the BVI Teachers Union.
Yes.
So for those who may have heard the name but not aware of what exactly the union is about, what's the Teachers Union, what's the purpose of it, and anything else you'd like to share?
Right. From my little research, the union started sometime back in 1934, and one of its main role is to look after the rights of teachers as it relates to salary, working conditions, and any issue as it relates to their career development. Education now becoming one and moving much closer to issues for union in the sense of where they're trying to improve the whole professionalization of the education system. So unions are now not just bringing to the table where they're agitating against governments for initiative that they may not like, but they're actually looking at ways of which they can actually help to improve what is being placed on the table. So if you now have teachers which, let's say for example, who don't have bachelor's degrees, you'll find the union now are finding ways of partnering with universities to actually help to
with
improve
their professional
development.
Good.
I think the government of the BVI recently signed an agreement with Laureate University.
Okay.
And that's a good initiative, which one was actually initiated by the Teachers Union. So these are the kind of things that a union does.
Okay. So it's not just about strike action.
It's not just about strike action, even though that is an important part of it. But one of the things we always say, when a good friend of mine right over there in St. Croix, he always used to say to me, Cecil, if you are actually going to talk about strike, you must make sure that your members are protected. And he's not talking not just about political protection, he's talking about financial protection, in the sense that if something don't go the way you want, and some of your members are actually affected by it, you can financially look out for them. So it's always there, but it's something that we actually
like last resort.
use as our last resort.
Okay.
So that's basically in a nutshell what it's the whole movement is all about. And we are also part of a wider family of the Caribbean Union of Teachers. I just arrived, came back from Belize, where we had our executive meeting there. And that was a very interesting meeting that we had there in Belize, looking at some of the wider issues that are taking place in the Caribbean as it relates to education. And surprising to me, we still have some issues that we actually have a lag in. And one of the ones we're talking about now is how do we, encourage the Caribbean Examination Councils to pay teachers who are staying back at home and marking SBAs. Those who actually travel to the different centers, like Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica, they are paid for their services once they're there. But those teachers who are at home and don't travel but still actually involved in matching, they are not paid. And so we have that call on the table, still asking the Caribbean government to really consider paying our teachers, so because that's part of improving the professionalization, paying people for what they're worth.
Yeah, compensation.
Compensation.
Yeah. That's all it is.
So those are some of the broader issues, and another issue we are now dealing with also from the broader area, and is coming home to roost too, is the whole issue of gays and lesbian rights. And not only that, how does these things affect the school vis-a-vis children who it is have same-sex parents, vis-a-vis children who it is may feel that, their own agenda, sexual persuasion is in a particular direction. So how do we deal? So these are the discussions that are now actually on the table, and we have to start looking at them.
And as a region now, educators are gathering and
looking at it, discussing with it, bringing professional Like in Belize, we had a lawyer from Belize who was a human rights activist talking to us about that. I mean, she was very frank. She said, look, I may not like the fact that, you know, persons may have certain persuasion of how they choose, you know,
to live their lives.
Yeah, their sex and sexuality. But from a human right perspective, she's a human right activist. So her job is to argue for people's human right. And it doesn't matter whether you believe what other person do or whether you don't.
You can't discriminate against them.
You should not discriminate. And that came across so profound. And I think it shook up on many of us.
Yeah, yeah, because we're very conservative as a society.
Yeah, we are very stereotypical
in
our, yeah.
And we don't realize the prejudices that we have sometimes.
Right.
That because of, you know, if you don't have the same beliefs that I have, then I think of you as less than, or, you know, I want to withhold something from you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. And that we have found, you know, as we go, we realize, look, as much as you want to actually say that you're actually working on behalf of persons in terms of the development, your prejudices are literally hampering not only your progress, but you're literally withholding some person from their own rights that is for them.
Yeah, because education is guaranteed basically for us up to a certain age to everybody.
For everybody, especially at the age group that we deal with, which is early childhood, primary education, secondary education. You understand? That is literally now a human right. Yeah. A human right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something where you see with, you know, even with issues like that, it's going to really take a level of professional maturity, you know, that where educators are able to walk into any situation and do their job.
Any situation. Yeah. I mean, any situation. I mean, literally any situation. It doesn't matter who are you're there to educate. You know, you're there to actually impart knowledge, and you're there to actually make sure that the people who it is in your charge are given an equal opportunity to succeed and succeed in me. Some would, some won't. But the point is, whatever impediment that you're seeing there, your job, even as an educator or your calling or your career calling, is to make sure that that person has every opportunity to succeed. Forget about whatever sex or sexuality they are. Do your thing. Do your job.
Yeah. Those are very important topics. I'm glad to hear
that
they're being discussed, especially on that level.
Yes.
As far as regionally and the collaboration that's going to go in there, because then, you know, everybody has a common problem. Then you can come up with solutions now.
Correct.
And, you know, customize to your or local environment or circumstances, and from there keep moving the education system forward.
Yes.
That's very key.
Yes.
So, what are some of the I guess, initiatives or challenges the union's currently working on now? And as it relates to the education sector, you know, what are some of the things you'd like to see happening over the next year or so?
Well, coming home to roost, one of the things you always would like to see, and we've discussed this at many times at different levels, as the country grows, what you're going to find is that education will become more and more important. And education is one of the most powerful tools that any country have that it can give its people in order for them to grow.
Yeah, I often say that's your truly economic policy, you know. Anytime you're going against poverty, education has to be the priority.
Have to be. One of the concerns that we've had and still would like to see addressed is this whole issue about quotas. Now, quotas in a sense I'm talking about where, let's say for example, you have grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 teachers. So if you have a quota for, let's say for grade 3 teachers of, let's say 40 or 50. Now those 40 or 50 positions that the government have are specifically filled for grade 3 teachers. So if you have grade 3 teachers there, and that grade said there's a quota, it means that and the minimum, let's say for example, the minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree for that particular post. But then it's difficult for that teacher to move up to a grade 4 if you only have, if you have quotas in the grade 4
So it
spot,
restricts them.
it restricts them.
Promotion.
So right. So then it then begs the question, you know, because most likely those grade 4s are the principals and whatever have you. So you want to be able, for a profession like this one, where knowledge is actually continuing evolving, that teachers are continuing to upgrade and improve themselves. So you want them to have a goal of learning is for life. I find that we need to look at that structure as it relates to the education sector, because really and truly, if a teacher now move from becoming a, educate themselves from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, you're now still stuck as a grade 3, but the salary cannot move, because at the end of the day,
promotion can't happen.
It's tied to that. So where does that leave you? You leave you in a stagnant rut. Then you have to wait on that teacher again.
And no incentive to improve yourself.
There you go. You have, precisely. I have to wait. You might have, as a teacher, you'll have to wait until a principal. And that may be years.
Yeah.
So while we may not be able to make a vertical move up or down, we have to find ways of increasing the breadth.
Yeah.
And make, you know, add different tiers. So those people who, and for years, for example, are department heads, who it is not a substantive post, but just a post where you pay a stipend. These things have to be regularized, because at the end of the day, you need to actually create the breadth. You know, those unit heads and those in school who actually are responsible for different units and whatever have you on farms. These things have to become looked at in terms of seeing how you can improve both the status of the education sector, improve the school, improve, you know, the goal of what teachers could work to attain, and compensate them for them, because what it actually says something. I am improving, I am growing, there's another level up, I can actually work to it. There's a ladder, a career ladder. So that's one of the areas we would like to actually see addressed in the future, and very speedily coming to. So that whole issue and its ties to compensation. Right? I know the minister, the former minister for education, touched on this one recently, the whole issue of where we actually, you want to say, took a pay cut, not to
with the increments.
With the increments. But this is another area that we would also like to lend our voice to, because at the end of the day, in other countries, when you actually do these things, you made unions would make agreement with government. Look, we would give you this, but to give it to you, like, for example, like, is a loan. So when you are able to pay back, you pay back.
Yeah,
but
after a certain time frame.
After a certain time frame. But that's another issue, you see, because at the end of the day, people are not entitled to what you call the increment. But really and truly, a cost of living, is certainly increasing.
Yeah.
It's not, especially for a high-end area like the British Virgin Islands.
Yeah. And you know, you're giving me flashbacks, because the president of the Civil Service Association, that was always one of the arguments that we carried. Right. Where, because you don't have a cost of living adjustment every couple of years, the increments I think are at 1.5% every step that you get every year. But then inflation is about 2 to 3% every year. So, you know, 5 years down the road, you are so far behind and you're feeling it, but you're not sure, you don't understand how the situation was created, because prices will go up. And that's economic, that's global economic terminology. Right. You know, you have places where deflation happens and the prices actually go down, but then that also has negative impacts on you in terms of buying power. So it's something that we really have to look at in terms of within the public service, as far as what's the purpose of an increment. Correct. You know, we understand that it was connected to the performance evaluation system, but then you also have the situation where every 10 years or so, they are going to be, the question of salary raises will come up. Right. You know, and then there's going to be pushback and the whole negotiation of it and who gets and how much they get and all of these things. So, you know, I totally support what you're saying, as far as we have to look at the compensation system. You have to look at it in such a way that you don't end up always looking at it only when it's in crisis mode. There you go. You know, there you go. That is something that's progressively working in the best interest of everybody. There you go. Both employer as well as the employee. At the employee. Because if you don't do that, what you find is eventually people get, you know,
bitter, those persons
morale goes down.
And then, you know, the quality of personnel that you would want to see in the education sector, people who it is are very much have value. They tend to want to look for the higher end of where they can support their families, and they are the one who more frequently exit the system faster than those who it is, you know, may have challenges and want to remain and say, look, I have to pay the bills. But it's not just about paying the bills, but it's about being able to value your service and being able to get fair compensation for what you're actually able to do. And these are some of the issues certainly we would like to see going forward. Another area.
And that's always going to be a constant conversation. That's a constant conversation.
And another area that we're certainly going to want to see some more cementing in is we need to start to look at a seamless curriculum between early childhood right up to higher education. Because at the end of the day, one must know where one starts and where one trying to get. And we've talked about this from since King Hatchet was a hammer. We need a, you know, a curriculum that's seamless.
And a lot of work was done in the past.
A lot of work was done.
We haven't seen anything realized.
Well, a lot of start and stops, but a lot of work have been done. There's been some progress nonetheless to actually do little bits and bits of it, the maths and the languages. So,
but as far as comprehensively,
there's more.
Overhauling the whole thing.
Where we sit down with the stakeholders and say, look, this is how the economy of the BVI is. This is how the BVI is. You know, what
this is
the skill set. This is right. You know, how much you're going to attribute to this sector, how much you're going, and the reason you're actually having this here, this subject area, and this is why you're giving it much more weighting. You're giving math and English much more time in the curriculum, vis-a-vis that you're giving areas like the technical and vocational areas, and get, you know, persons like yourself who it is have a vested interest in the country and say, look, what, where, how, what are we going to do? Because it is important. We need that map. That map that says
especially in education.
Especially in education, not for tomorrow, but for the future.
And that's such a key point, because it's not just about us being able to say at the end of every school year, this is the number of graduates. We need to be able to say, this is the number of prospects when it comes to nursing, lawyers, doctors, plumbers, mechanics, carpenters, the whole nine.
The whole nine,
Because where our education system is, that's basically the lab where we're producing the next set of builders, as it were, for the country.
In every aspect.
And we need people in all sectors, not just, you know, going into trust companies or government, but in all sectors. Otherwise, that is creating a vacuum. And I remember Ms. Parsons did mention this in her speech. She was a speaker at the graduation for college a few years back, and she was, you know, talking to the graduates in terms of, you know, if you don't do it, who? Because then it's going to create a vacuum in the job market, and when persons coming in and are applying for the jobs and getting the jobs, and you're still unemployed, it's not a matter necessarily of, you know, people coming in and taking away your job. Were you trained for that particular job that these permits are being issued for?
Precisely.
So I stopped getting excited about numbers. we have to, you know, lift up the first page and start looking at the analysis. You know, if I'm saying 10,000 work permits were issued. You know, my question is, how many of those are renewal? How many of those are new? What areas are these being issued into? And in a job market where you're telling me, I think one of the reports I saw, I don't know how long ago this was, but they say we have 18,000 persons that are employed on record with the statistics. You know, 10,000 permits. You see where I'm saying? You know, that means that those are persons that are not Virgin Islanders, but I'm pumping people out of the education system. I'm sending them away to college and coming back. So I'm creating a crisis situation, if it hasn't already happened, that is about to hit the roof.
And I remember there was I was actually invited to a Contractors Association meeting a while ago back. That was back in the 80s. And there was a chief question one of the panelists asked. He said, if we are developing this country, we need to ask for whom? Because those similar statistics that you're exposing there, he was actually exposing them around the table as well. So he's saying that you have to grow the country with the people that is being produced there. And like you very much mentioned, at the end of the day, 10,000 workers permit, vis-a-vis you have 18,000 people. Now, these are serious, serious concerns, because at the end of the day, the question is, well then, how do you now actually start to plan that the product that you're developing, is it what the economy wants, what the marketplace wants? The question you talk about analysis, then the question begs then, how do we actually make decision vis-a-vis looking at these numbers? Because I like to look at numbers myself, but I like to look at the qualitative aspect of it, which I much more enjoy. But really and truly, the numbers do say a lot.
They should have flagged.
Yeah.
So you got to go examine now and say what's going on.
What's going on here? So where's the plan for us now to actually remove that? And another area, for example, the whole maritime area. The question is, when you hear anyone speak of the Virgin Islands, the question always comes to mind, well, what do you do? People always start off about the boats. But then when you look at what is taking place in the schools and in the education sector vis-a-vis that particular market,
there's nothing
there. That's like virgin territory for us, which we have not entered into from a curriculum standpoint. So it's still there, virgin territory, and it's like a hands up, but we need to actually address that and address it very quickly, because it is a market that is literally lucrative and there for us to actually enter, and it's the right.
And that opportunity now, the entry point is basically through education.
Through education.
Through education.
Through education. Through education.
Very much so. Cecil, we could stay and talk all night, but we have to take a commercial break and be right back. So if you just tuning in, you missed a great startup conversation. Tonight we're talking with the president of the BVI Teachers Union, Mr. Cecil Hodge. I'm your host, Shaina Smith, and we'll take our commercial break and be right back. Welcome back. You're tuned in to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Smith, and with me tonight I have the president of the BVI Teachers Union, Mr. Cecil Hodge. We've been talking before about what the union was, or is rather, and the education sector, some of the concerns, the challenges, and things that we have to look at in terms of building our country. This was one of the things I wanted to talk about a lot last year as far as nation building, to help us understand exactly what that is, because it's not something for politicians to do. It's something for all of us as a society.
Correct.
And, organizations like the Teachers Union is very important.
Yes.
We were just talking on the break in terms of the union being a good corporate citizen as far as, y'all are invested in things like the BVI Investment Club.
Correct.
So when we talk about things like the Bywater contract,
right.
Y'all have a vested interest in what happens there, because, these things are affecting everybody.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, sometimes at levels we don't understand.
Correct.
Right immediately.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts in terms of, whether from the union's perspective or your own personal, in terms of current affairs? And let's start first with the economy.
Right.
We talked about education being or economic policy, as it were, and when we're talking about things like combating poverty, because persons can't make enough, or let's say they can't make a living wage to support themselves or their family. And oftentimes, when you peel it back, it starts to go back to, what's their skill set, how are they educated, how are they trained, what opportunities are there for them to upgrade their skills,
right,
so that you don't have basically a dwindling middle class, as it were, because then you end up with the poor and the rich, and there's nothing in between. And that's something that could develop so fast in a society before you get a chance to quell the trend that, persons don't understand. So one of the concerns I have is when you hear people talking about having to work 2 and 3 jobs,
right,
at where our minimum wage is, are these things that, we need to be advocating, very seriously about looking at the minimum wage and getting it increased to where it should be.
Correct. You see, at one time in our community, the whole issue of the I born here mentality used to work.
In terms of getting a job.
In terms of getting a job. there was this inherent set of beliefs and philosophy surrounding that motto.
Yeah.
I born here.
So I'm entitled.
I'm entitled to a fair share of my piece of the economy, whether that means land, whether it means education, whether it means business opportunity.
Yeah.
But what we are seeing happening is where we are now saying that whether a person is born here or not, is whether or not you're qualified to take the post. So that I born here is now taking a back seat.
Yeah.
And what we are left with is that education now has become that entitlement for you to actually get that job. Now, if that's the case, then we have to make sure that our people are actually have the necessary skill set and qualified to actually take these posts. So that in itself is one aspect of it. And that goes back to the point I was making before, where we have to have a curriculum that looks at the economy, that looks at the country in its entirety, and make a plan in order to make sure we have the product that is being produced in all institutions actually match what's needed.
Yeah. So that's like saying then the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Labor have to be best friends.
Have to be best friends. They must speak.
Yeah.
Right now, do we speak?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we are speaking. I'm not sure we are around the table at all. And I'm saying that's what we need to get happening. They need to be on the same page and around the table.
On the same agenda.
On the same agenda, and speaking to each other. So it's like oil and water, the economy, not even the biggest one, as you mentioned, is the private sector. We don't speak enough. We need to speak. We need to dialogue. The private sector, education, need to speak. Public sector, we're there, part and parcel, but we need to speak. But going back to the point that you make about the whole issue about organization like the BVI Teachers Union being good corporate citizens, that's something we take very seriously in terms of participating in the economy of the country. And as you mentioned, the issue about buy water, I remember when the discussion came on the table about, improving the water system and actually possibly bringing another operator to assist. And we were wondering, well, how it would affect our investment, because there's 200, on our books we have 215 members. That's a lot of members. And we did invest in the organization, in the water company, because we see it as our responsibility to participate in the economy. And not only that, we're looking at helping to improve the organization to become self-sufficient. Yeah. Because you shouldn't be, every time you have an initiative, you're burdening the government by actually become a collective beggar instead of becoming a collective participant in what you want to be doing. So this initiative, or that initiative, certainly we actually took a serious interest in it, in the sense of wondering how it's going to actually affect, the bottom end, at least the bottom end, or even the middle or top end of our investment. And it did, because at the end of the day, you would see the returns from the investment has significantly reduced. So this is something that we certainly have serious concern about and would like to see improve. And there's other areas that we would like to participate in as well, because there's...
So you guys are looking at cruise ship?
There you go.
Park?
There you go. This is going to be one of our agenda discussion come up in February and our midterm break meeting, because being part and parcel of the economy and being a good corporate citizen is what we do. And it's part of our mandate as well to make sure that as teachers that we continue to stay on the forefront of what is actually happening in the economy and what is taking place. And these are some of the critical issues. So we are looking and seeing what's going on, but we also want to participate in it. And by the organization, we continue to have these different mandates to do so. So yes, we're going to be looking at...
That's key, and that's very important. I'm glad we were able to share that tonight in terms of letting people know, when we see, or we sometimes look at them as social organizations, because you might not be in the news every month.
Right.
That you're still behind the scenes, playing a big role. Right. Both in the classrooms as well as, the educators coming together and looking at other
And this is one of the ways we get exposure with persons like yourself, who would give the organization an opportunity to speak about what it's doing and how it's actually doing. And this is one of the avenues that we continue to try to improve, because really and truly, media is not a cheap cheap thing.
Yeah.
Especially to do it well.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be able to actually.
Yeah, but public relations is so
public
important.
relations is
It's very
absolutely important.
So, yeah.
But in terms, as you said, about those persons who actually have to work 2 and 3 jobs,
Yeah.
it do affect us, because at the end of the day, we do have some of those social issues that do some of the spin-offs from what
and they
actually
show up in your classroom.
it shows up right on your doorstep in the classroom, because really and truly, like I said to people, you know, teachers sometimes see students more than their parents, and that's the bottom line. It's a fact. But that don't mean we're going to be taking over their role, the parenting role.
Yeah.
A parent is a parent, a teacher is a teacher. We have separate and different roles. You understand? A child needs
their parents.
their parents.
Yeah.
In most cases, a father and a mother. And that doesn't necessarily mean a biological father and mother, but they need a father
those
and
father
mother.
Figures and mother figures.
That mother figures. So if you have someone who's working 2 and 3 jobs, it then leaves a vacuum in the home, because the question then begs, where does that value transition that's supposed to be from the community to instill in the students about what, you know, good respect, good manners, good morals,
yeah.
ethics, understand? And the whole issue of how do you portion, for example, your work environment and your home environment.
Yeah.
Because if you're working 3 jobs, then that's an imbalance. It means therefore you're teaching
24 hours in
24 hours.
Yeah.
Then what are you teaching the child? Look, then that what work is more important than making sure that I'm home and we're having getting clothing, and you know, we're having a good dialogue around the kitchen table about how was your day. So we have to be very careful and look at that vis-a-vis what is happening in the economy. So if one person have 3 jobs, then I'm trying to wonder, well, then the product that we are producing in education, how many, and I remember not too long ago we did some numbers as to how many of our young people are still unemployed. Then the question begs then, some of them preparing families, but they're not employed. Then the question then, how these children are going to eat, and how are you going to support them? Because what, one person have 3 jobs, and I have a youth unemployment, something's wrong.
We do have a social crisis.
We have a challenge.
Just put it out there.
So
we have a crisis situation that, as a society, from top down, the leadership, you know, and all the different institutions, because I remember we had a guest on recently talking about family being one of the social institutions of our society.
Right.
And I think we downplay it, where, you know, what happens in the home, that's their business.
Right.
But what happens in the home is everybody's problem.
It is, precisely.
You know, so it can't be that, you know, when things are in harmony, the society is in harmony. When things in the home is not going well, it shows up in the society eventually.
It does. It does. I have a friend in England who it is like 78 now, making 80 or over that. And as far as she's concerned, a family actually create more neurosis in children than anything else. I'm like, for real? She said, well, you really check it out. The amount of broken homes that you have, it might as well, no wonder children actually, she said, cling to teachers when they go to school. Some of them, children don't want to go home. She said, you never ask yourself why? She said, because some of the major concerns that children have are right in the home, and the issues them are right there, facing them every day. So some of them really don't want to go back home. But what we have to look at and see, if the family as an institution is going to be that bedrock upon which we actually build our society, then we have to give them that support. But we have to know what is actually what's the problem. We could check the courts and see what is happening in terms of the divorce rate. We could check the courts and see what, we check the police records and see the level of abuse reports that are going on there. And but then when we check that, what are we doing to plan it?
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
You know,
so it's like we have that information, we have the indicators of there being issues, but then the question now is what's the solution?
What's the solution?
What are we working on to solve these issues?
I don't just want to know about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I want for us to
and that's the thing for me where it really concerns me, because you know it's something where you know it goes back to people when we talk about minimum wage, we talk about it from an economic standpoint, but we need to talk about things like minimum wage from a socio-economic standpoint. Because if I want a strong family, I have to say, well, I need my mothers to be able to have a living wage, work in one job, decent hours, so that she can go home and raise her family,
right,
and be able to train her daughters and her sons to be good citizens.
Good citizen, right?
You know, because that's basically what's happening. We have a academic training, and we have those things that you know it are instilled at home or outside of the classroom environment,
right,
in your family. You know, teaching you responsibility, teaching you, you know, what it is to be honest about things, teaching you to live with integrity, and all of these other important things that aren't necessarily going to be translated in the classroom,
right,
but they happen in the child's environment.
Correct.
You know, and if there's a vacuum, other things, wrong things, negative things are going to come in. And we have the situation we have, because we started off the show before we came in talking about, you know, I'm concerned about our young men killing themselves or killing each other.
There you go.
You know, and that is an issue. That is
It's a serious issue. And I said to somebody, I reached to the point now, I'm so concerned. I've attended more funerals than graduation that I've attended. That's a problem.
Yeah.
For children, I have a problem with that. We cannot be raising a nice product only to see it just snuffed out just like that. So if we have guns in our community, we have to get them off the street. What is the plan? We have people being gunned down in our streets. Children. Children. I'm saying children. I have to call them children because at the end of the day, they ain't live a day yet.
Yeah.
Why is that? We don't manufacture gun here. We don't have a gun shop.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, where are these guns coming from?
Yeah. And, you know, talking about gun laws in terms of, you know, mandatory sentences, that for me is reactionary.
Yes.
What's the preventative? What are we doing at our borders?
Precisely.
What are you doing at the ports?
Yes.
As far as ensuring they're not getting in the proliferation that they obviously are.
How often do we patrol our borders, making sure that, you know, that these things that are not supposed to be in our country don't come?
Yeah.
So that goes back to the whole issue, and I always say to people, the quality. You can have a product, but if it's not a quality product, you will see where it's fractured. And those concerns, the guns, you know,
and the levels of crime going up, people breaking into your house while you in it.
While you're in it, you understand?
No.
And persons who it is will know very well that there is a TV camera watching them, but they put on something over their face and nonetheless still actually rob and steal. That's saying volume about how prepared we are to deal with some of these things. And
and those things as far as stealing, that's something where you're teaching a child from 5.
From 5.
If it's not yours, you don't take it without permission.
You're going to the fridge, taking out milk, but you didn't ask mommy or daddy permission.
Exactly.
You understand?
So if you don't have that training there, when they get out into society and they decide they see something that they want, they're going to go and take it up.
Yeah. But just to go back a little bit, and I probably might be able to touch about that, and I was talking about the issue of quality employment, because you see, when you talk about a person have 2 and 3 jobs, the question you ask is it a quality job? Because if you have 2 or 3 jobs, I'm saying if it's not, if the first or second one wasn't able to provide, the question then begs me, well, what is the second and the third one that you're doing? Because at the end of the day, when you look at really and truly the product that is being developed, the question you ask is it a quality product? Well, now, I believe the BVI is a very high-end destination. But we have to be careful that we don't dilute the product in the sense that really and truly you want to, yes, you like to see the 3 tourist ship in the harbor, and people would get the feeling that, look, for some reason, quantity means
we're benefiting.
We're benefiting, or is it quality? Because, you know, there is that theory, you know, the more you expose, you know, the product to, you know, the people who can't really, so to speak, afford it, well, then how does that actually impact your society? Because if I have the quantity out there, but I'm still hearing people saying, the statistics is still showing I have 1 parent working 3 jobs.
Yeah, you're
Is
not
it a
making a living wage.
yeah,
Yeah.
is it the quality product that we want? So, you know, when you look at...
And some of it too, we need to be clear as far as some of it is where persons feel they don't have a choice.
Right.
And there are those now that would have a choice as far as, you know, try to get that one job that gets you that minimum wage and
Right.
basically live within your means.
Means.
Because there are situations where persons are living beyond their means. So therefore, you have to get all these jobs to pay bills that have been created.
Precisely.
Versus saying, you know, as Granny say, hang your hat where you can reach it.
Correct.
When you can reach higher, then
Correct.
you put it up.
There you go. There you go. So exactly, that's exactly the point. It's really and truly lots. So even if a person is able to make a decent salary, they're able to match it with what is their level of expectation vis-a-vis
Their lifestyle.
their lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, but if you still, we have the minimum wage still too low, that needs to be addressed, because you
Yeah,
really...
when the cost of living is
and the
where
cost of
minimum
living,
wage is,
it is just not matching up,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I think there's been talk about I guess a commission was put in place to look at it this year, but you know that's been done in the past, and if anything was done, it hasn't been significant enough to curtail the issue that's still there. And again, we have to look at it from a socio-economic standpoint. It can't just be about, well, businesses are going to say, well, the cost of doing business is going to go up, but the trickle-down effect in terms of things like crime, where I got people on the street breaking into your business, you have to take those things into consideration. You're either going to pay for it upfront, significantly less by increasing the wages of your employee, or you're going to pay to put in the cameras and hire the security guard,
Right.
or pay taxes to put people in prison.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? So
Correct.
nothing is free in our society,
Nothing
and
is.
nothing, we are not detached from anything. Everything affects all of us some way if we follow the trail long enough. Eh? So that's good. Well, we're going to take a pause here and have another commercial break. If you're just tuning in, you're missing an exciting conversation. You have to tune into the replay with our president of the BVI Teachers Union, Mr. Cecil Hodge. So we'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back. You're tuned into the Vigilate Dialogues. I'm your host, Shaina Smith, and with me this evening, I have the president of the BVI Teachers Union, Mr. Cecil Hodge, and we have been having an exciting dialogue tonight.
Lovely, man. Lovely, lovely.
We're going to definitely have to do a part 2 on this one. We talked about Teachers Union, education sector. We talked about social development in terms of some of the social challenges that we have.
The economy.
And the connection or the interconnectivity of everything with economy, because a lot of times we talk about, you know, things like minimum wage, but we don't understand where, you know, it follow the trail long enough, it's going to go right back to education.
Correct.
As part of one of the facets of how you attack those issues that we have. And the importance of family as an institution in our society in terms of being the bedrock
Right.
on which things come up on. So, you know, when we talk about things like crime, we can't just talk about gun laws,
Right.
but we have to look at, you know, the value set that our generation is being taught
Right.
in terms of it's not yours, leave it.
Correct.
You want something, work for it.
Correct.
You know, and not to say crime is going to be, you know, eliminated 100%, but it's something where, you know, one young man dying is one too many.
Oh,
And
yes.
we have to, as a society, hold that as a value and say that we need to look at the issue as far as, you know, what is going on, where is all this violent behavior coming from, and, you know, attack it head on. Don't let the elephant stand up in the room watching us and we're not doing anything about it, but it's trampling us to death.
Yes. Yes.
You
yes.
know, so that is so key. So when we go to the head of the fountain now, where we're going to find is governance,
There you go.
politics.
Yes.
I often say to people, you know, politics is not a season, it's not an event. It's something that's, it's our day-to-day life.
Yes.
Policy decisions are being made, policy actions are being taken every week. When the cabinet sits and makes decisions on legislation that they want to take to the House of Assembly, or contracts they want to award for particular, whether it's services that they're hiring. Let's say, for example, I read the other day that we hired McKinsey & Co. to do, I guess, looking in terms of a strategic plan for financial services.
Right.
You know, what's going to be the next direction for that industry.
Right.
You know, and different things like that. So I think we're in a place now where when it comes to political leadership, we have to be very concerned as far as, you know, the decisions that are being made and not just accepting the rhetoric anymore.
Right.
And I know as president of the union, you know, you guys, you have to interact with the leadership, you interact with the government. But, and even so as an individual, because again, we're, as what I refer to it as, we're the owners of the Virgin Islands. So we have to have a vested interest in terms of what's happening here.
Right.
The decisions that are being made, and be more vocal about what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's your thoughts or your opinions in terms of our political maturity or political system, and as we approach another general election, what are some of the things you want to see being talked about? Mm-hmm. And you know, and what's your criteria when you're looking at, well, who am I going to put in to run my country for the next 4 years, and hopefully have a vision of what's going to happen over a longer term period? Right.
Very interesting question. Well, as you asked about what you mentioned about the president of the Teachers Union actually having to dialogue with the government, that was almost the norm in the last government. Mm-hmm. What we have realized that we have not had those type of dialogues in this current government since it began. That is a rather unfortunate situation. Mm-hmm. Because in the last government, we used to meet the last Thursday of every month. Okay. And had some dialogue with the Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education or the Minister of Education. That is something that certainly we have not done since this government. We had one meeting, but it used to be the norm. And I think that is an important thing that needs to always be there. Mm-hmm. Because it not only talks about, you know, the trends and what is happening and how we can actually plan and dialogue with the policies them going forward, mm-hmm. but to see where, if we are on the same page. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the whole issue about finance and having someone hired to do a strategic plan, mm-hmm. going forward for finance. That is something that the Teachers Union need to be also around the table. And it is a very important aspect of our economy and planning, just stakeholder. Mm-hmm. Because as I said, look, when you look at the whole issue of finance in our education system, again, finance is a serious part of our economy. It's one of the niche markets that we operate in. Mm-hmm. But then when you look at the school curriculum, there's an area, it's like virgin territory, you have not touched it, and it's like a hands-off approach. Mm-hmm. I mean, as if it's not for us. As if it's not for us. The smallest of a child now leaving our primary school, or even by the time they reach high school, should be talking about stocks, bonds, mm-hmm. mutual funds, ETFs. Mm-hmm.
Understand what the trust funds are,
what they are. Yeah. Understand how to actually probably invest on Wall Street, because mm-hmm. what? We're in an area that this is a niche market that we're mm-hmm. working in. So when you look at the policy climate for those areas like finance, you realize that it's like an area that we are separated from. Mm-hmm. But we have to find a way where our leaders then start to look at how you can bridge that gap, because you must be able to see the manifestation of what your country is involved in manifesting in its education system, or else what you're going to have is a mismatch. Mm-hmm. So that is a serious area that we have to look at in terms of a vision going forward for the future, because mm-hmm. it is such an important one. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned earlier, I spoke about the maritime technology, which is another area of interest mm-hmm. that we need to look at going forward. Yes, one of our
industries here.
That we have to look at going forward. So any leaders coming forward now, we have to see them actually start to dialogue and speak about these things, because really and truly, mm-hmm. if they're not, then the question begs then, well, what are you doing? You spend your top in mud, because what? Mm-hmm. You're somewhat separated from the real issues that are happening.
Reality.
That's happening on the ground. Mm-hmm. So these are another area again, and this is probably up your alley again, and we had some discussion and start to talk about the whole issue of health and safety in this country. Mm-hmm. That's another biggie that we have not touched on, mm-hmm. the whole issue of health and safety. Yeah. When you look at the developments that are taking place in the country, we have policies, but then the question, who police them? Mm-hmm. You have houses building mm-hmm. too close to the roads. Yeah. You have no some of them are building, but the drainage systems are poor, and they're actually eroding, creating, undermining issues, road mm-hmm. issues, access for the ambulance to get to persons who are sick. Mm-hmm. Some houses.
The whole thing of addressing systems so the ambulance knows where it needs to go.
Right. Yeah. How when you see, but these guys are good too, because sometimes when you see they have to maneuver mm-hmm. into some, but the roads are you know,
Yeah,
not properly planned.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you're looking for in the future, we have to be able to create the policies, but we have to be able to police them and see to it that they're done, because the environment, and I think the BVI environment, it is a high-end product, and I go back to keep saying that. So how you plan the environment from a development for even look at the health and safety issues, get into them. You know, when you're driving on the road, how safe do you feel that you're not going to fall off the cliff?
Listen, I actually wrote in a letter to Communication at Work the other day, and I was complaining about, or voicing my concern about the lack of proper street lights from Parkwood Pond to Towers. Because especially as a female driver, even though it's 10 o'clock in the night, all there is pitch dark. There are 3 solar lights out there now. They don't work all the time. And it's something where I'm seeing lights on roads that don't get used as often. And this is on our main highways, you know. So, and we like to address things when it is impacting our visitors. But let's deal with me. Because I want to feel safe on my own road. You know, that's just what I'm saying. Right.
No, but you're so right. Because you see, and even in the Beef Island area, I realize a lot of people walk on that road early in the morning, and sometimes it's 4 and it's dark.
It's very dark.
Now, these concerns, so the whole issue you mentioned about how you you're looking at the broader picture and the policy development. And of course, the whole issue of medical tourism, I think that's now been exposed as another
as a
possible industry. And I think it's one that worth exploring, and it have value there that needs to look deep, and the dialogue needs to begin and see how we actually can start to look at that. But again, it comes back. We have to make sure our education system is prepared, or otherwise you're creating another industry for somebody else. And this is one of the major concerns that we're having. Again, to go back to that question which was asked in the 80s. We're developing, but be developing for who? So you have to feel that. A friend of mine came to me some days ago and he said, Mr. Hodge, I'm going to drop this one in your lap and I'm going to go leave you. And I said, why are you going to drop on my lap now? He said, no, I need you to start to look at what you talk about, indigenous organization. But it's funny enough, when I came back from Belize, the Belizeans, they were the Garifunas, which is a part of our indigenous people there, were talking about their indigenous right, their right to speak their own language, their right to actually, you know, develop their culture, wear their own clothes in their schools, dressed in their clothing that their Garifunian people used to dress in. And funny enough, I said, you must have been reading my mind, because really and truly, that is something that is very important, making sure that, you know, as your heritage is protected. So collectively, when you're looking at developing policies, these things we must make sure that they are around, that they're there, and that we are at the forefront of our mind and include them in the dialogue, because it have an impact upon all the different sectors that we participate in, and how we present ourselves to the world at large, and how we present ourselves to even the people that come to live among and would want to live among us.
And you know, that's so key, because, you know, in one of the last articles I wrote, I talked about Virgin Islands 2.0, where we're talking about, you know, what's kind of going to be the next version of our society.
Correct.
Because things have changed over the last 30, 40 years so significantly that, you know, even if there are things where we would like to reverse back, you know, we're not going to be able to.
No, you're not.
Because we that far down the road. You have a society where you have, you know, a lot of high immigration, and with that you have intermarriage. So you have a lot of, you know, mixed culture.
Correct.
And, you know, we want to preserve everything.
Right.
So we want to preserve what we consider to be BVI culture, as
but
well as embrace those that have come in. But, you know, we need to have equal footing, and it's up to us to, as Virgin Islanders, to say, you know, this is our culture, these are our values as a society. So if you're coming in, this is what we expect to have as far as your integration into the society. Because I think social cohesion is also one of those topics I'd like to hear more about, as far as how we integrate. And, you know, the spin-offs, we talked about this just before the show started, as far as, you know, when you have children that are born here, but they don't have immigration status. You know, so they're falling through as cracks in the system, and it's infecting them emotionally and psychologically, because then we're failing them as a country, because we either need to tell them, well, yes, you were born in a hospital, but you know, we don't consider you to be a national.
And that
be
is
upfront, have that upfront
from
conversation.
And I think you're so right, because you see, and that goes back to the whole issue of how you actually, I remember one time a friend of mine around a table, we were discussing some union issues. And the policies that we were talking about, there was a portion of the budget that we were developing for the initiative. He said that we need to put in the public relation of how you're going to educate people about it. Nobody didn't understand what he meant. So if you're going to develop a policy on immigration, but then there have to be a part and parcel, a part of the budget that specifically deals with education and public relation. Let's say, for example, you talk about the social ills of some of those policies that are developed if they're not actually articulated well. I've had children who it is, students who've come to school, and you realize that they're angry, but you don't know what they're angry about. And when you literally dig down deep and start to ask that dialogue, and you said, well, what is happening here? Mommy and daddy actually left and they gone home, but I have to stay with auntie. Why? I don't have a passport. So the child is angry. Oh, you're talking about a child is 11, 12 years old, and you realizing a child that is 11, 12 years old is angry to the point that they understand that they can't move. Literally, they're stuck. They can't move. They can't go to auntie and mommy on vacation. You know.
Their parents will have to apply for status for them now in their home country.
And there you go.
To be able
and
to
that in itself is another political dialogue and another political set of issues and drama that they have to go through. So you have the effect of these policies if they're not literally
that's a social
publicly
impact.
Properly socially structured and right down to the common person in the house.
In your classroom again.
In the classroom that can understand that. You have a set of angry students who understand and discussing politics. And some of it sometimes we ourselves don't understand because we ourselves don't understand some of the policies that affect them. And it goes back to the whole issue, I mean, people who are who've married, as you said, the intermarried relationship between one culture and another culture. Dialoguing and actually educating people about these things, you know, that goes back to proper communication tools. The internet that we have, the governmental information system, we have to get these things up and make sure that people have access to them. And I mean access. The grandma who it is cannot read. We might have to have, and who cannot use the computer and the internet. You know, you go and you have in those communities for community centers, and you get some iPad and you show them how to actually use them. Not the the high-end and the advanced. You know, you give them something simple that they can actually, so you want to know about this, you know, you're able to slide across and open up a page and, you know, play a little video. You know, you can see somebody in the Department of Education talking about what is actually happening, and they're able to understand. You know, I want to understand about the policies for passports. It's just there that you can have access to it, but you have to educate them. And these are some of the things. So developing the policies is one thing, but making sure that it gets to where it's supposed to get to is another thing.
Communicated well.
Yes, and one of those biggie ones is always the financial sector, where the policies are developed. But yes, we hear it argue in the house, but these things have to be.
We need. I should be able to have access to legislation when it's being debated. That it understood on a website.
And that is understood. You see.
Very key.
So.
We are so out of time. I think you're coming back for part 2.
I will be my pleasure.
Coming back for part 2, but you know, and it's, you know, it's almost as if not a conversation getting good just when it is we gotta wrap up. But I will definitely have you back. We have to have a part 2 because I really want to also talk about the whole thing of the role of the public service overall in the society. And how you know, they're like I always used to say before to us as being we're the guardians at the gate. Because anything that happens, again, when we talk about policy implementation, policy development, policy execution, it all happens in the public service before it goes anywhere else. And so that is so key.
I'll be happy to return, ma'am, and I want to say call at any time.
All right. Ms. Hodge, thank you for being here. You've been tuned in to the Vigilante Dialogues. I'm your host, Shaina Smith, saying let's continue to change the conversation for a better Virgin Islands.